A billionaire walked into the restaurant where I worked, and within 5 minutes, I knew someone wasn't making it out of their shift employed. His name was Tyler Vandyke, and he was infamous for one thing: firing people on the spot for showing even the slightest disrespect to his deaf mother. When our hostess made the critical mistake of ignoring her completely, his face turned to stone. But then his mother's communication device malfunctioned, leaving her stranded in total silence at the table, and the panic in the room became suffocating. That's when the shyest waitress on our staff, a girl named Peyton who barely ever made eye contact, did something that made the entire restaurant freeze. She walked straight up to that table and started signing, fluently, confidently, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Nobody at Marcello's had ever seen Peyton speak up about anything. She was the kind of person who apologized when someone else bumped into her, who took the worst shifts without complaint, who seemed to physically shrink when a customer raised their voice. So when she stepped forward and her hands began moving in perfect, graceful sign language, it wasn't just surprising. It was like watching a completely different person emerge from inside her skin. Vera's entire face transformed. The frustration melted away, replaced by shock, then relief, then something that looked like gratitude mixed with disbelief. Her hands flew up to respond, and suddenly these two women were having a conversation in the middle of a silent restaurant, while Tyler Vandyke stood there, his anger suspended in mid-air, watching his mother smile for the first time that evening. But here's what made this moment truly dangerous. Tyler wasn't known for sentimentality. He was known for standards, impossibly high standards. And everyone in that restaurant knew that one wrong move, one perceived slight against his mother, and careers ended. So as Peyton signed, asking Vera what she'd like to drink, every server, every busboy, every person in that building held their breath, waiting to see if this shy waitress had just saved herself or signed her own termination papers. What none of them knew was that Tyler had been watching, really watching. And what he saw in those next few hours would reveal something about Peyton that even she didn't fully understand yet. The kitchen doors swung open with their usual metallic screech, and Peyton caught fragments of the conversation before she even stepped into the dining room. "He fired 3 people last month," Annalie hissed, her fingers fumbling with the silverware she was rolling. 3. One of them just asked if he wanted sparkling or still water. Jalen leaned against the server station, her eyes wide. What did they do wrong? That's the thing. Nobody knows. He just looked at them, said "you're done," and walked out. They didn't even get to finish their shifts. Peyton kept her head down, sliding past them to check her section assignments. She'd worked at Meridian for 8 months now, long enough to recognize the particular flavor of panic that came with VIP reservations. But this felt different. The air itself seemed thinner, harder to breathe. Tierra appeared from the back hallway, her face pale beneath her makeup. "Jeffrey just briefed the front-of-house staff. Tyler Vandyke. Tonight, 7:30. The name landed like a stone in still water, ripples of anxiety spreading through every conversation in the room. "The Tyler Vandyke?" Annalie's voice climbed half an octave. "The one who owns half the commercial real estate downtown? And that hotel chain, and those tech investments." Jalen had pulled out her phone, scrolling frantically. "Oh God, look at this article. Van Dyke's zero-tolerance approach to service excellence. He literally believes one bad employee can destroy an entire brand." Peyton's stomach tightened. She'd been hoping for a quiet Thursday night, the kind where she could slip through her tables like a ghost, collect her tips, and get home to her studio apartment without anyone really noticing she'd been there at all. That's how she preferred it. Invisible meant safe. "Why is he even coming here?" Tierra whispered. "We're good, but we're not Michelin star good." "His mother," Annalie said, and something in her tone made everyone lean closer. I heard Caitlin talking to Jeffrey. He's bringing his mother. She's different. Difficult. Different how? Annalie shrugged, but her eyes held that gleam people got when they had gossip they were dying to share. Just high maintenance, I guess. Specific preferences. You know how rich people are. Peyton felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest, but she said nothing. She never said anything. That was her survival strategy. Polished over years of foster homes and group settings where being noticed meant being targeted. The dining room doors opened again, and manager Jeffrey stepped through, his usually calm demeanor replaced with something bordering on manic intensity. Listen up, everyone. I need perfection tonight. Not good, not great, perfect. Tyler Vandyke expects nothing less, and I will not have this restaurant's reputation damaged because someone couldn't follow basic protocols. His eyes scanned the assembled staff, lingering on each face like he was trying to determine who would be the weak link. Caitlin, you're on greeting. Smile, but not too much. Professional warmth. Peyton, you'll have station 4. That's where I'm seating them. I chose you because you're quiet and you don't make mistakes. Peyton nodded. Though the assignment felt less like a compliment and more like being handed a live grenade. Questions? Jeffrey's tone made it clear there should be none. The staff dispersed in silence, each person retreating to their pre-shift rituals. Peyton walked to the small employee bathroom and stared at her reflection. Mousy brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Minimal makeup. The kind of face that blended into wallpaper. She splashed cold water on her wrists, an old grounding technique from her childhood therapist. Through the door, she could still hear Annalie and Jalen speculating about what would happen if someone displeased the billionaire, their voices a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. Peyton dried her hands and straightened her apron. In 2 hours, Tyler Vandyke would walk through those doors, and she would do what she always did: stay small, stay quiet, and pray that invisibility would be enough to keep her safe. She had no idea that tonight, invisibility would be the one luxury she couldn't afford. The moment Tyler Vandyke stepped through Meridian's entrance, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Peyton was refilling water glasses at table 7 when she felt it. That sudden shift in atmospheric pressure that happens when someone truly powerful enters a room. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they softened, became more careful. Even the ambient music seemed to lower its volume out of respect or fear. She turned slowly, glass pitcher still in hand, and got her first look at the man who'd consumed every nervous conversation for the past 2 hours. He was younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s, maybe, with sharp features that looked like they'd been carved rather than grown. His charcoal suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months. Fitted so precisely, it might as well have been a second skin. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Steel gray, constantly moving, cataloging every detail with the intensity of someone who'd built an empire by noticing what others missed. And on his arm, moving with quiet grace, was his mother. Vera Vandyke was elegance personified. Silver hair styled in a soft wave, a deep blue dress that whispered rather than announced, pearls at her throat that caught the light. She had to be in her 70s, but she carried herself with the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime refusing to apologize for the space she occupied. Peyton noticed the device immediately, a small tablet-like screen mounted on an adjustable band around Vera's left wrist. The kind of assistive technology she'd seen before, back when she'd volunteered at the community center during her brief attempt at junior college. Communication device, which meant, "Good evening, Mr. Vandyke." Caitlin's voice was pitched perfectly between professional and warm, exactly as Jeffrey had coached. She stood at the host stand with her best smile, the greeting she'd probably practiced 20 times in the mirror. "We're so honored to have you dining with us tonight." Tyler's nod was minimal, almost curt, but his hand remained steady on his mother's arm, protective without being possessive. "Your table is ready," Caitlin continued, gathering 2 leather-bound menus. "Right this way." She started walking, and that's when Peyton saw it happen in slow motion. Caitlin glanced back over her shoulder, making eye contact only with Tyler, her body language completely oriented toward him as she spoke. "We've prepared our best table for you, Mr. Vandyke. I think you'll find the ambiance perfect for your evening." Vera's lips pressed together just slightly. Her free hand moved toward the device on her wrist. Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but Peyton caught it. That micro-expression of someone swallowing anger they'd swallowed 1,000 times before. From her position across the dining room, Peyton watched them move through the space. Other diners recognized Tyler. She could see it in their widened eyes, their whispered conversations behind raised hands. But not a single person seemed to register Vera as anything more than an accessory, a +1, someone to be acknowledged with a polite smile before returning attention to the man who mattered. Jeffrey materialized from nowhere, intercepting them before they reached table 4. "Mr. Vandyke, welcome. Everything has been prepared to your exact specifications." Again, only Tyler. Only the billionaire. Vera might as well have been invisible. Peyton felt something uncomfortable unfurling in her chest. She knew that particular brand of invisibility intimately. The kind where people looked through you rather than at you. Where your presence registered only as a supporting detail in someone else's story. She watched Vera's hand move to her wrist device again, her fingers dancing across its surface. A small screen lit up, displaying text that Caitlin and Jeffrey were too busy fawning over Tyler to notice. Tyler noticed, though. He always noticed. His mother was trying to communicate something, and no one was paying attention. Peyton moved closer to her station, ostensibly checking that her tables were properly set. But really she was observing. Years of being invisible had taught her to read rooms, to notice the undercurrents that others missed because they were too busy performing. Vera was frustrated. Not angry. Frustration. The kind that came from patience worn thin by repetition. Caitlin pulled out Tyler's chair first. Protocol dictated you seat the woman first, but she was so focused on impressing the billionaire that basic courtesy evaporated. Tyler's hand tightened fractionally on his mother's arm. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice carrying a warmth that didn't match the ice in his eyes. "Let me help you." He pulled out her chair himself, waited until she was seated comfortably, then took his own seat across from her. Vera's fingers moved to her device again, but something was wrong. The screen flickered once, twice, then went dark. Peyton saw Vera's expression shift, saw the exact moment when frustration transformed into something closer to panic. She tapped the screen. Nothing. Pressed the power button. Nothing. Tyler leaned forward, concern erasing the careful businessman mask he wore. "Mom? What's wrong?" But Vera couldn't answer. Not in a way he could hear from across the table, not in a restaurant full of ambient noise and watching eyes. The device was dead. And Peyton realized with crystalline clarity that she was watching a woman become trapped in silence, right in the middle of a crowded room, while everyone around her remained blissfully, dangerously unaware. Vera's hands moved in sharp, urgent gestures, signing, Peyton realized, but Tyler was already pulling out his phone, his attention divided between his mother's distress and whatever solution he was trying to find on the small screen. The gap between them might as well have been a canyon. Caitlin returned with water glasses, still wearing that practiced smile. Can I start you with something from the bar? We have an excellent... Give us a moment. Tyler's voice could have cut glass. Caitlin's smile faltered. Of course, I just thought... I said give us a moment. The hostess retreated so quickly, she nearly collided with a busboy, her face flushed crimson. Across the dining room, Peyton saw Jeffrey watching with barely concealed horror, already calculating the damage control he'd need to perform. But Peyton couldn't look away from Vera. The older woman's hands had stilled, settling in her lap with the defeated heaviness of someone who'd fought this particular battle too many times. Her eyes, the same steel gray as her son's, held something that made Peyton's chest ache. Not anger, resignation. Tyler was speaking in low, urgent tones, holding his phone toward his mother. I'm calling Marcus. He can bring your backup device. 40 minutes, maybe less if traffic. Vera shook her head. Her hand lifted, made a gesture that Peyton didn't need to understand sign language to interpret. It's fine, don't worry about it. But it clearly wasn't fine. Mom, you can't... Tyler's frustration was leaking through his controlled exterior. I can't understand when you... He stopped himself, jaw clenching so hard, Peyton could see the muscle jump. Just give me a second to think. Other diners were starting to notice now. Table 6 kept glancing over with poorly concealed curiosity. An older couple at table 9 whispered behind their menus. The attention that had initially been admiring was curdling into something else. That uncomfortable voyeurism people directed at public struggles they felt relieved weren't their own. Vera's hands moved again, faster this time, her signs becoming more emphatic. Tyler watched them helplessly, understanding maybe one gesture in 5. He was trying, that much was obvious, but trying wasn't the same as communicating. Mom, slower, I can't. His voice cracked just slightly, revealing something raw beneath the billionaire armor. Please. Vera stopped signing. Her hands dropped to the table, and she looked away, toward the window where downtown lights were beginning to glow against the darkening sky. In profile, her expression was carefully neutral, but Peyton recognized that particular brand of composure. It was the same mask she wore every time someone looked through her instead of at her. The mask that said, I'm used to this. I'm fine. I don't need anything. The mask that was always, always a lie. Tyler ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it for the first time since he'd entered. Okay, we'll make this work. I'll order for both of us. You like the salmon, right? Or was it the... He was grasping, and they both knew it. Caitlin approached again, tentative this time, menus extended like peace offerings. Mr. Vandyke, I'm so sorry for the interruption. Whenever you're ready. Does this establishment, Tyler said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that preceded explosions, have anyone on staff who knows sign language? Caitlin blinked. I'm not sure. I can ask. How is it possible that you don't know? Each word was precisely enunciated, controlled fury given voice. My reservation specified that I was bringing my mother, my deaf mother. This was communicated 3 weeks ago, and you're telling me no one thought to prepare for the possibility that she might need accommodation? Sir, I apologize, but I wasn't aware. That's the problem, isn't it? No one is ever aware. Tyler's hands pressed flat against the white tablecloth. My mother isn't an afterthought. She isn't a complication to be managed. She's a human being who deserves to be able to communicate in her own restaurant, and your staff has managed to make her feel invisible in under 5 minutes. The dining room had gone silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to have paused, as if the entire building were holding its breath. Caitlin's face had gone from flushed to pale. I'm so sorry, Mr. Vandyke. Let me get our manager. I've met your manager. He's the one who walked right past my mother without acknowledging her existence. Vera reached across the table, placing her hand over Tyler's. Her expression was gentle, forgiving, but underneath Peyton could see the hurt she was trying to spare her son from feeling. The weight of being someone's burden, even when that someone loved you more than anything. Tyler looked at his mother's hand on his, and something in his face crumbled. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I should have. Peyton didn't remember making the decision to move. One moment she was standing at her station, observing from her safe distance. The next, her feet were carrying her across the dining room, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every survival instinct she'd honed over 23 years was screaming at her to stop, to turn around, to stay invisible. Tyler Vandyke fired people for asking the wrong question. What would he do to a waitress who presumed to intrude on a private moment? But Vera's resignation was a mirror Peyton couldn't look away from, and suddenly staying safe mattered less than being seen. She stopped at their table. Tyler's head snapped up, his gray eyes blazing with barely restrained rage at another interruption. Peyton swallowed hard, lifted her hands and signed, "Excuse me, may I help?" Vera's head turned so fast, Peyton heard her pearls click together. The older woman's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a small O of surprise. Tyler froze, his anger suspended mid-breath. And in the silence that followed, Peyton's hands moved again, this time directed at Vera. "I know sign language. Would you like me to interpret for you tonight?" For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Vera stared at Peyton like she'd materialized out of thin air, which, in a way, she had. The invisible waitress, suddenly visible in the most impossible way. Tyler's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something Peyton couldn't quite name. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at his mother, then back at Peyton, as if trying to reconcile what he'd just witnessed with the shy server who'd been hovering at the edges of his awareness. Then Vera's hands flew up, moving with an urgency that made Peyton's heart squeeze. "You sign? Really sign? Not just the alphabet?" "Really sign," Peyton confirmed, her fingers finding the familiar shapes she hadn't used in months. "ASL. I'm not an interpreter. I'm rusty. But I'm fluent enough." "Oh, thank God." Vera's signs were graceful, practiced. The movements of someone who'd been using this language for decades. "My device died and Tyler is wonderful, but he only knows about 50 signs and 40 of them are, 'I love you,' and 'sorry.'" Despite everything, the tension, the watching eyes, the billionaire who could end her career with a word, Peyton felt her lips twitch. "Those are important ones, though." "They are," Vera agreed, and now she was smiling, really smiling, the careful neutrality melting into something warm and grateful. "But they don't help me order dinner." "What?" Tyler found his voice, rough around the edges. "What are you saying to each other?" Peyton's hands stilled. She'd been so focused on Vera that she'd almost forgotten the room full of people watching this unfold. Forgotten the manager who was probably calculating whether to fire her or promote her. Forgotten everything except the relief in an elderly woman's eyes. She turned to Tyler, and her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. "Your mother was explaining that her device malfunctioned, and that you know some sign language but not enough for a full conversation. She asked if I could help interpret for the evening." Tyler leaned back in his chair, and Peyton couldn't read his expression. It wasn't anger, at least she didn't think so. It was something more complicated, layered. He studied her like she was a puzzle piece that had appeared from the wrong box, but somehow fit perfectly anyway. "You know ASL," he said. Not a question. A statement requiring explanation. Yes, sir. How? It was the question Peyton had been dreading, the one that required offering pieces of herself she usually kept locked away. But Vera was watching her with open curiosity, and somehow that made it easier. I grew up in foster care, Peyton said quietly. One of my foster sisters was deaf, Emma. She was 8 when I was 13, and nobody in the group home knew how to communicate with her. She'd just sit in corners, isolated. So I checked out library books and taught myself. Took me almost a year to get conversational. She didn't mention the real reason she'd learned, that Emma's isolation had been a mirror of her own, and reaching across that divide had felt like saving them both. Some truths were too tender to speak aloud. Vera's hands moved, and Peyton translated without thinking. She says that was a beautiful thing to do. She says Emma was lucky to have you. Emma was the lucky one? Tyler's voice held an edge of something that might have been emotion, quickly suppressed. My mother has been coming to restaurants for 40 years. Do you know how many times someone has signed to her without being specifically hired to do so? Peyton shook her head. Twice. He held up 2 fingers. Twice in 40 years. And you just walked over. It didn't sound like gratitude. It sounded like accusation, though Peyton couldn't figure out what she was being accused of. Vera signed something rapid, emphatic. Tyler watched his mother's hands, caught maybe half of it, and looked to Peyton. She says you're embarrassing her, Peyton translated, softening her voice with the affection that colored Vera's signs. She says stop interrogating the nice girl who's trying to help and let her do her job. A smile ghosted across Tyler's face, brief, unexpected, transforming his features from intimidating to almost handsome. She's very bossy when she wants to be. I heard that, Vera signed, and Peyton couldn't help it. She laughed. The sound surprised her as much as it surprised everyone else. Peyton didn't laugh at work. She barely spoke at work. But something about Vera's mock indignation, the way Tyler's severity cracked to reveal the devoted son underneath, the sheer absurdity of the past 5 minutes, it bubbled up before she could stop it. She says she heard that, Peyton translated, still smiling. Tell her I know she did. Tyler's expression had gentled. And tell her I love her, even when she's scolding me in front of the staff. Peyton's hands moved, translating. Vera's response was immediate. Tell him I love him too, and that I'd like to finally order some food before I starve to death. Your mother says, I got that one, Tyler interrupted, and this time his smile reached his eyes. Some phrases transcend language barriers. He gestured to the empty chair beside his mother. Would you sit, please? It'll be easier than standing, and something tells me this is going to be a longer conversation than a typical order. Peyton hesitated. Jeffrey was going to have a stroke. Sitting with guests wasn't protocol, it was practically heresy. But Vera was already pulling the chair out, patting the seat with enthusiasm. Please, she signed. I haven't had a real conversation in a restaurant in 3 years. Humor an old woman. So Peyton sat, and as she did, catching sight of Annalie's dropped jaw and Jalen's wide eyes across the dining room, she realized she'd just made herself the most visible person in the entire restaurant, the exact opposite of every survival instinct she'd ever developed. The strange part was that for the first time in her life, visibility didn't feel like danger. It felt like finally, impossibly, being exactly where she was supposed to be. The ordering process took 20 minutes, not because Vera was indecisive, but because she had questions about everything. Real questions, the kind people ask when they're actually being included in the experience, rather than having decisions made for them. Is the salmon wild-caught or farm-raised? Her hands asked. Does the risotto have mushrooms? I'm allergic to shiitake but not portobello. Can they make the sauce on the side? Tyler always orders for me and forgets I hate when things are too saucy. Peyton translated each question, watched Tyler's expression shift from surprise to something that looked almost like grief. How many times had he ordered for his mother, thinking he was helping, not realizing he was inadvertently silencing her? When Peyton finally stood to put their orders in, Vera caught her hand. "Thank you," she signed, and the emotion behind it made Peyton's throat tight. "You have no idea what this means." "I'm glad I could help," Peyton signed back, and meant it more than anything she'd said in months. She headed toward the kitchen, acutely aware of the eyes tracking her movement. The entire front-of-house staff had witnessed what just happened, and their expressions ranged from confusion to envy to something approaching awe. Jeffrey intercepted her at the server station, his face unreadable. "Peyton, a word." Her stomach dropped. Here it came, the reprimand for breaking protocol, for sitting with guests, for being presumptuous enough to think she could help. That was... Jeffrey paused, searching for words. Unexpected. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just saw that she needed help and..." "No." He held up a hand. "Don't apologize. Tyler Vandyke just told me that was the best service his mother has received in any restaurant ever. Do you understand what that means for Meridian?" Peyton blinked. Not really. It means you just saved all of our jobs." Jeffrey's laugh was slightly hysterical. "Continue doing whatever you're doing. Whatever they need, you provide it. Understood?" She nodded, still processing, and moved into the kitchen to submit the orders. That's where Demetrius found her. "Well, well." His voice dripped with false sweetness. "Look who's suddenly the star of the show." Peyton had worked with Demetrius for 6 months and had perfected the art of avoiding him. He was the kind of server who treated the job like a competition. Everything was about tips, about rankings, about who got the best sections and the biggest parties. "I'm just doing my job," she said quietly, trying to slip past him. He blocked her path, leaning against the expo station. "Your job? Sitting with guests isn't your job, Peyton. Or did Jeffrey rewrite your duties while I wasn't looking?" She needed help. Her communication device broke. "Right. The deaf mom." Demetrius's tone made Peyton's hands curl into fists. Must be exhausting for him, dragging her around everywhere. Can't just leave her at home with a nurse like normal people. Something hot and sharp flared in Peyton's chest. "Don't." "Don't what?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. It's sad, really. Woman that age, can't even order her own dinner without making a whole production out of it. She can order her own dinner just fine when people bother to learn how to communicate with her." "Oh, so now you're the hero? Little Mouse finally found her voice?" Demetrius straightened, and there was an edge to his posture now. "Must be nice, getting all the glory for knowing party tricks. Some of us have been busting our asses here for years." Gavin appeared from the walk-in cooler, catching the tail end of the conversation. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Peyton said, grabbing the water pitcher she'd come for. "Excuse me." But as she pushed back through the kitchen doors, she heard Demetrius mutter to Gavin. $10 says she's angling for a big tip. Probably learned sign language last week on YouTube." The comment shouldn't have stung. She knew it wasn't true, knew Demetrius was just jealous, but it burrowed under her skin anyway. Because part of her still couldn't believe she'd done what she did. The shy girl who never spoke up had just sat down at a billionaire's table and made herself essential. When she returned to table 4, Tyler was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Vera sat alone, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze distant. The moment she saw Peyton approaching, though, her face brightened. "You're back," Vera signed, almost childlike in her enthusiasm. "I was worried you'd been reassigned." "Not reassigned," Peyton assured her, setting down fresh water. "Just putting in your orders." "Good. Because I have so many questions for you." Vera's eyes sparkled with mischief. Starting with, how does someone so young end up working in a restaurant when she clearly has talents that could take her anywhere? The question caught Peyton off guard. It pays the bills." "That's not an answer. That's an excuse." Before Peyton could respond, Tyler ended his call and set his phone down with more force than necessary. "Marcus will be here with your backup device in 20 minutes, Mom, though it seems like you're doing fine without it." Vera's hands moved, and Peyton translated. "She says she's doing better than fine. She says she's having an actual conversation for the first time in weeks, and you should stop worrying so much." Tyler's jaw worked. "I always worry." "I know," Vera signed, reaching across to pat her son's hand. "It's one of your more endearing flaws." "What did she say?" Tyler asked. "That worrying is one of your more endearing flaws," Peyton translated, then watched Tyler's expression cycle through exasperation and affection. "Tell her that keeping me worried is one of hers." The easy banter between them, made possible only through Peyton's hands, created an intimacy that felt both privileged and precarious. She was the bridge between them, but bridges could collapse under too much weight. From across the dining room, Peyton caught Demetrius watching their table, his expression calculating. Beside him, Corinne and Jaylene whispered behind raised hands, glancing over every few seconds. The attention made her skin crawl. This was exactly what she'd spent years avoiding: being noticed, being discussed, being the subject of speculation. But Vera was signing something new, a question about Emma and the group home, and Peyton found herself answering, her hands moving through memories she rarely let herself revisit. "What happened to her?" Vera asked. "Your foster sister?" "She was adopted," Peyton signed, "by a deaf couple. They were perfect for her, gave her everything I couldn't. I was happy for her, but—" "But?" Peyton's hands hesitated. "But I missed having someone who needed me the way she did. It sounds selfish." "It sounds human," Vera corrected gently. "We all need to be needed. It's not selfish to miss being someone's bridge to the world." Tyler was watching this exchange with fierce concentration, trying to follow along but clearly missing pieces. When Peyton glanced at him, she found his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her want to disappear into her chair. "You miss her," he said, not a question, but a recognition. "Every day," Peyton admitted aloud, and something in her chest cracked open saying it. Tyler nodded slowly, and in that moment, Peyton saw past the billionaire exterior to the man underneath, someone who understood what it meant to love people you couldn't quite reach, no matter how hard you tried. The kitchen doors swung open, and Demetrius emerged carrying a tray. He was headed toward table 6, but his trajectory angled him close to table 4, close enough that Peyton saw the moment his foot hooked the chair leg. The stumble looked accidental. The water glass he knocked over definitely wasn't. It tumbled directly toward Vera's lap, and Peyton's hand shot out on pure instinct, catching it mid-fall, water sloshing over her wrist, but not a drop touching Vera's dress. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" Demetrius's voice rang with false horror. "These chairs are so close together. Are you okay, ma'am?" But he wasn't looking at Vera when he said it. He was looking at Tyler, performing concern for the person who mattered. Vera hadn't flinched. She sat perfectly still, her hands resting on the table, watching Demetrius with an expression Peyton couldn't quite read. Tyler, however, had gone absolutely rigid. "Peyton," he said quietly, "what just happened?" And Peyton, holding the water glass with shaking hands, realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could smooth this over, make excuses, stay invisible and safe. Or she could tell the truth and risk everything. I set the water glass down carefully, my pulse hammering in my ears. The truth sat on my tongue like a stone, heavy and dangerous. It was an accident, I heard myself say, the lie tasting like ash. The chairs are close together. Demetrius's smile was victorious. Exactly. So sorry again. He moved away toward table 6, and I felt something inside me shrivel. Tyler's eyes lingered on Demetrius's retreating form, then shifted to me. He didn't believe me. I could see it in the slight narrowing of his gaze. But he didn't push. Not yet. Vera's hands moved. That wasn't an accident. I froze. I've been deaf for 43 years, Vera continued, her signs precise and calm. I've learned to notice things other people miss. Body language, micro-expressions. That man looked right at me before he stumbled. He wanted to see if I'd react, if I'd make a scene. I don't think, I started, but Vera cut me off. Don't protect people who don't deserve it, sweetheart. I've had a lifetime of people underestimating me, mocking me, treating me like I'm not fully human. I know exactly what I saw. Tyler leaned forward. Mom, what are you saying? Vera turned to her son, and her hands moved with deliberate emphasis. Peyton watched Tyler's face darken as he caught fragments, enough to understand his mother's anger, if not every word. She says, I hesitated, then made my decision. Vera deserved the truth, even if I was too cowardly to say it myself. She says that server knocked the glass deliberately, to test if she'd react, to see if she'd cause a scene. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. And you? Tyler's voice was dangerously soft. What do you think? I thought about Demetrius's smirk, about his earlier comments, about the way he'd looked at Vera like she was an inconvenience rather than a person. I thought about Emma, about all the times I'd watched people dismiss her, ignore her, treat her existence as a burden. I think, I said carefully, that your mother is an excellent judge of character. Something flickered across Tyler's face. Respect, maybe, or recognition. He pulled out his phone, and I watched him type a message, his jaw set in a way that made me deeply grateful I wasn't on the receiving end of whatever consequences he was arranging. But Vera reached across and touched his wrist, stopping him. When he looked up, she signed, Not now. Don't let him ruin our evening. We're having too good a time. Mom, he deliberately... I know what he did. But I've dealt with worse, and I'll deal with worse again. Right now, I'm having dinner with my son and talking with someone who actually listens. Don't waste this moment on anger. Tyler stared at his mother for a long moment, then slowly put his phone away. You're too forgiving. I'm selective about my battles. There's a difference. I translated, watching the tension in Tyler's shoulders ease slightly. But his eyes tracked Demetrius across the dining room, cataloging, remembering. The food arrived, brought by Jalen, not Demetrius, which told me Jeffrey had already started damage control. And for the next half hour, I found myself caught in the strangest, most wonderful dinner conversation of my life. Vera asked me about my childhood, about the foster homes, about Emma. She told me about losing her hearing after meningitis at 32, about the marriage that hadn't survived the adjustment, about raising Tyler alone while learning to navigate a world that suddenly treated her like she was broken. People think deaf means dumb, she signed, her hands sharp with old frustration. They speak louder, like volume is the problem, or they give up entirely, patting my hand and smiling like I'm a child who can't understand complex thoughts. I've watched it happen, Tyler interjected when I translated. My whole life, watching brilliant people dismiss my mother because they couldn't be bothered to find a pen and paper. Your father was the worst, Vera signed, and there was old pain there, carefully contained. He tried at first, but eventually I became too much work, too complicated. He remarried within a year, someone who could hear him, someone who didn't require accommodation. I felt that familiar ache in my chest, the one that came from recognizing your own wounds in someone else's story. I'm sorry. Don't be. I got Tyler out of it, and he's worth 10 of his father. Vera's expression softened as she looked at her son. Though he inherited his father's tendency to try to fix everything, even things that don't need fixing. What's she saying about me? Tyler asked, but he was smiling. That you're a fixer, I translated. That you try to solve everything. Guilty, he admitted. It's a control thing. If I can anticipate every problem, prepare for every contingency, then nothing can... He stopped, jaw tightening. Then nothing can hurt me the way your father hurt her, Vera finished. And I translated without thinking. The silence that followed was heavy with truth neither of them had spoken aloud before. You've gotten very good at reading my mind, Tyler said quietly to his mother. I raised you. I don't need to read your mind. I helped build it. When I translated, Tyler laughed. A real laugh, unguarded and warm. The sound transformed his entire face, and I caught Jalen staring from across the room, likely wondering what magic I'd performed to make the terrifying billionaire look so... human. Vera's fork clinked against her plate, and she pushed the remaining risotto around thoughtfully. Can I ask you something personal? Of course, I signed. Why do you make yourself so small? The question hit like a physical blow. I don't... You do. You apologize for taking up space. You translate my words but barely speak your own. You're brilliant and kind, and you act like those things are something to hide. Vera's eyes held mine. I spent years making myself small so other people would be comfortable. It's exhausting, and it's a terrible waste. So I'm asking, why? My hands hovered in the air, unsure how to shape an answer to something I'd never articulated, even to myself. What's she asking? Tyler interjected. I could have deflected, could have offered some sanitized version that protected my armor. But something about Vera's directness, her refusal to let me hide, made me tell the truth. She's asking why I make myself invisible, I said aloud, then signed the same to Vera. And the answer is that invisible is safe. If nobody sees you, nobody can hurt you. Nobody can leave you. Nobody can love you either, Vera signed back. Nobody can need you, appreciate you, see the extraordinary things you're capable of. You're not protecting yourself, sweetheart. You're imprisoning yourself. Tyler watched this exchange, and even though he couldn't follow all of it, I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. She's right, isn't she? Whatever she just said, she's right. Before I could answer, a commotion erupted near the bar. Raised voices, the crash of something breaking. Jeffrey was speed-walking toward the source, his face pale. And I heard, unmistakable, carrying across the dining room, Demetrius's voice, loud with liquid courage. I'm just saying, if you can't function in a normal restaurant, maybe stay home. The rest of us shouldn't have to. He never finished the sentence. Tyler was already standing, his chair scraping back with enough force to turn heads. The carefully controlled billionaire facade was gone, replaced by something colder and infinitely more dangerous. Peyton, he said, his voice perfectly calm in a way that raised every hair on my arms. Would you please stay with my mother? I nodded. watching him cross the dining room like a predator who'd just spotted prey. Vera's hand found mine on the table, squeezing once. "Here we go," she signed, and despite everything, there was a hint of satisfaction in her expression. I tried to save that young man from himself. Tyler doesn't forgive people who disrespect me. "What's he going to do?" I asked. Vera's smile was small but fierce. "Probably something I'll pretend to disapprove of but secretly enjoy. My son has many gifts. Restraint isn't one of them." Across the dining room, Tyler reached Demetrius. I couldn't hear what he said. His voice was too low, too controlled, but I watched the color drain from Demetrius's face as he realized exactly who was speaking to him. And I realized, sitting there with Vera's hand warm in mine, that I'd crossed a line tonight I could never uncross. I'd stepped out of the shadows, made myself visible, chosen sides in a conflict I'd normally avoid at all costs. The terrifying part was that I didn't want to go back. Tyler spoke to Demetrius for exactly 45 seconds. I counted, watching the clock above the bar tick forward while Demetrius's face cycled through confusion, anger, fear, and finally devastation. Whatever Tyler said, it was surgical, precise. The kind of controlled destruction that came from someone who'd built empires and knew exactly where to apply pressure to make things crumble. When Tyler finished, he didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked back toward our table, leaving Demetrius standing frozen by the bar, his face the color of old newspaper. Jeffrey materialized instantly, his hand on Demetrius's shoulder, guiding him toward the back hallway with the urgency of someone doing triage. Corinne and Jaylene scattered like startled birds. Tyler reclaimed his seat, picked up his water glass, and took a deliberate sip. His hand was perfectly steady. "Everything all right?" I asked, though my voice came out smaller than intended. "Everything's fine." His tone suggested the matter was closed. "My apologies for the disruption, Mom." Vera's hands moved. "What did you do?" I explained that his employment here had concluded, effective immediately. "Tyler." Vera's expression held exasperation and affection in equal measure. "You can't fire every person who's rude to me. You'd run out of people." "I didn't fire him. I don't own this restaurant." Tyler's smile was thin. "I simply made it clear that if he remained on staff, Meridian would never see another dollar of Vandyke business. Not from my company's corporate accounts, not from my associates, not from any of the 36 organizations where I sit on the board." Jeffrey made the practical choice. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This was the other side of Tyler Vandyke, the billionaire who could destroy livelihoods with a sentence, who wielded power like a scalpel. "That's still firing him," Vera signed, "just with extra steps." "He mocked you, made you feel unsafe in a public space. There are consequences for that." Tyler's voice held no apology. "I won't let anyone treat you as less than you are, not when I can prevent it." Vera looked at her son with complicated emotions playing across her face. Frustration at his protectiveness, gratitude for his love, weariness at being the cause of someone's termination. Then she turned to me. "Do you think I'm wrong to feel guilty?" The question caught me off guard. "I think you're not responsible for other people's choices." He chose to be cruel. Tyler chose to respond. "But I'm the catalyst. I'm always the catalyst." The resignation in those signs made my throat tight. I'd heard the same tone from Emma years ago when she'd asked if she was too much trouble for our foster family. "You're not a catalyst," I signed back, my hands moving with more force than I'd intended. "You're a person who deserves respect. The fact that some people can't manage basic human decency isn't your fault." Tyler leaned forward. "What are you telling her?" I met his eyes. That your mother isn't responsible for other people's inability to treat her like a human being. Something shifted in Tyler's expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition of an ally. Good. Because she spent too many years apologizing for existing in spaces that should welcome her. I don't apologize for existing, Vera signed, but there was less conviction in the movement than her words suggested. You apologized 3 times tonight alone, I signed back. For your device breaking, for needing help, for me spending time at your table. None of those things required apology. Vera's hands stilled. She looked at me with those sharp gray eyes, Tyler's eyes, and I saw her calculating, reassessing. You're braver than you pretend to be. So are you, I signed. Okay, this is torture, Tyler interjected. What are you saying that's making my mother look like she's about to cry? But before I could translate, the restaurant's front door opened, and a man in an expensive suit rushed in, carrying a small case. He spotted Tyler immediately and headed over. Marcus, Tyler greeted him. Thanks for coming. Marcus nodded, slightly out of breath, and opened the case to reveal a backup communication device identical to the one on Vera's wrist. Got here as fast as I could. Traffic on 5th was... He stopped, noticing me. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were with someone. This is Peyton, Tyler said. She's been interpreting for my mother. Peyton, this is Marcus, my assistant. I started to stand, to excuse myself now that the backup device had arrived, but Vera's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Don't you dare, she signed with one hand, the other still holding me in place. Device or no device, you're staying. Marcus caught the exchange and something clicked in his expression. Surprise, maybe even shock. He'd probably never seen his boss's mother so adamant about keeping someone close. I should really get back to my other tables, I said weakly. What other tables? Tyler's eyebrow arched. I noticed Jeffrey reassigned your entire section the moment you sat down with us. You're officially dedicated to this table for the remainder of the evening. Had he? I glanced across the dining room and realized Tyler was right. Jalen was handling my usual section, and Corinne had taken over my side stations. See? Vera signed, finally releasing my wrist. You're stuck with us. And before you say you don't want to impose, remember what I said about apologizing for existing. I felt a laugh bubble up despite everything. You're very stubborn. It's a family trait, Vera signed, glancing meaningfully at Tyler. We tend to keep the people we like, whether they want to be kept or not. Marcus efficiently swapped out Vera's dead device for the working one, but I noticed she didn't immediately start using it. Instead, she kept signing, her hands moving through the air with a fluidity that suggested she preferred this method, preferred the intimacy of a language that required full attention, eye contact, presence. Tyler's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then looked at his mother. Mom, that was the board. I need to take this call. It's about the Singapore acquisition. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Vera waved him away. Go. Peyton will keep me company. After Tyler stepped away toward the restaurant's quieter alcove, Vera turned to me with an expression that was pure mischief. Finally. Now we can talk about my son without him hovering. Mrs. Vandyke, Vera, please. Mrs. Vandyke was Tyler's grandmother, and she was terrifying. She leaned closer, conspiratorial. Here's what you need to understand about Tyler. He thinks he's protecting me, but really, I'm protecting him. From what? From becoming so isolated that he forgets how to connect with people who aren't on his payroll. Vera's signs grew more serious. He's built walls so high I sometimes can't see over them. His father's abandonment, the pressure of the business, constantly having to be the person who solves everything. It's made him lonely, powerful, successful, but profoundly lonely. I didn't know what to say to that. The vulnerability in Vera's signs felt like a gift I hadn't earned. Why are you telling me this? Because in 3 hours, you did something I haven't seen anyone do in years. Vera's expression softened. You made him laugh. Real laughter, not the polite sound he makes at board meetings. You treated me like a person, which made him remember how to be a person instead of just a billionaire. That's rare, Peyton. That's valuable. I just helped translate. You did much more than translate. Vera's hands were firm. You saw us, both of us, and you didn't want anything in return. Do you know how unusual that is in Tyler's world? Before I could respond, raised voices erupted from the back hallway. I turned to see Demetrius emerge, his face blotchy with anger and unshed tears, Jeffrey close behind trying to calm him down. This is bullshit, Demetrius's voice carried across the entire restaurant. I've worked here for 3 years, and one complaint from some billionaire. Lower your voice, Jeffrey hissed, but Demetrius was beyond caring. She's not even... Demetrius's eyes found our table, found Vera, and something ugly crossed his face. You couldn't just stay quiet? Had to make a whole scene, get me fired because I accidentally bumped a chair? Vera's expression didn't change, but I felt her hand tighten slightly on the table. I stood before I realized I was moving. My chair scraped back, drawing Demetrius's attention. You didn't bump a chair, I heard myself say, my voice steadier than I felt. You deliberately knocked over a water glass to humiliate someone who couldn't defend herself with words. And when that didn't work, you mocked her at the bar, loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh, so now you're... I'm not finished. Something hot and bright was burning in my chest, years of watching people like Emma be dismissed and diminished, all of it channeling through me. Mrs. Vandyke didn't get you fired. Your cruelty got you fired. Your inability to see a deaf woman as fully human got you fired. Don't blame her for the consequences of your own choices. The dining room had gone silent. Every eye was on us, on me, the invisible waitress who apparently wasn't invisible anymore. Demetrius's face contorted. You self-righteous... That's enough. Tyler had returned, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Marcus, please escort this man from the premises. If he refuses to leave, call the police. Marcus moved forward, and Demetrius finally seemed to grasp the futility of the situation. He shot one last venomous look at our table, at Vera, at Tyler, at me, then turned and stormed toward the exit. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. In the silence that followed, I realized my hands were shaking. I sat down heavily, adrenaline draining away and leaving me hollow. Vera's hand found mine immediately. That was the bravest thing I've seen in years. That was stupid, I signed back, my hands trembling. I shouldn't have. You should have. And you did. Vera squeezed my hand. Do you see now? Do you see what happens when you stop making yourself small? Tyler reclaimed his seat, his gray eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to disappear into the upholstery. Thank you. For what? For defending my mother when I wasn't here to do it myself. He paused. For doing it even when I was here. For being exactly who you are instead of who you think you should be. If stories like this remind you why small acts of courage matter, drop a comment about someone who stood up for you when you needed it most. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded, my throat too tight for words. Vera was watching both of us with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, satisfaction mixed with something that looked almost like hope. And I realized that somewhere between the broken communication device and defending a woman I'd just met, I'd stopped being invisible. The terrifying part was that I couldn't figure out if I wanted to disappear again. The rest of the dinner passed in a strange, dreamlike blur. Dessert arrived, creme brulee for Vera, espresso for Tyler, nothing for me despite Vera's insistence that I try the chocolate torte. Other diners had stopped staring, or at least become more subtle about it, returning to their own meals and conversations. But I could still feel the weight of what had happened pressing against my ribs. I'd confronted Demetrius, in front of everyone. The girl who spent her entire life avoiding conflict had stood up and called out cruelty, and now there was no taking it back. Vera seemed to sense my spiraling thoughts. Her hand found mine again, squeezing gently. Stop overthinking. I'm not. You're doing that thing where you replay everything you said, wondering if you should have stayed quiet. Vera's signs were knowing, almost motherly. I did it for years. It's exhausting and pointless. What's done is done, and what you did was right. Tyler was watching our exchange, and even though he couldn't follow every sign, he was learning to read the emotional tenor of our conversations. She's telling you not to second-guess yourself, isn't she? How did you? Because that's what she tells me every time I start catastrophizing. He smiled, but it was edged with something vulnerable. We're both overthinkers. It's hereditary. He gets it from me, Vera signed, along with the stubborn streak and the inability to let things go. What did she say? Tyler asked. That you inherited your stubbornness from her, I translated, grateful for the distraction from my own spiraling anxiety. Guilty as charged. Tyler set down his espresso cup with deliberate care. Though I prefer to call it persistence. You would, Vera signed, and this time Tyler caught enough to understand. He laughed, and the sound was becoming familiar now, less startling, more natural. Jeffrey approached the table, his expressions somewhere between reverence and terror. Mr. Vandyke, I wanted to personally apologize for this evening's incidents. Please know that we've taken immediate action, and I assure you nothing like this will. Tyler held up a hand. Jeffrey, stop. The manager froze mid-sentence. This evening has been exceptional, Tyler continued, and I watched Jeffrey's face cycle through confusion. Your staff, specifically Peyton, provided the best service my mother has received anywhere in the country. The incident with your former employee was unfortunate, but your handling of it was appropriate. Thank you, sir. That's very. I'm not finished. Tyler's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. I'll be reaching out to your ownership group. Meridian should have accessibility protocols in place. Sign language basics for front-of-house staff at minimum. I'm willing to fund the training if needed. Jeffrey blinked. That's incredibly generous. It's not generosity, it's common sense. Tyler glanced at his mother. 20% of the population has some form of disability. That's a significant market you're potentially alienating through lack of preparation. I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone. I watched Jeffrey process this. The realization that what seemed like criticism was actually an opportunity. We'd be honored to implement any recommendations you have. Good. My assistant Marcus will be in touch. Tyler's dismissal was polite but absolute. Jeffrey retreated with visible relief. You can't help yourself, can you? Vera signed when he was gone. You have to fix everything. I'm improving systems that need improvement, Tyler countered. There's a difference. Is there? But Vera was smiling as she signed it. Tyler turned to me. Peyton, I need to ask you something, and I'd appreciate your honest answer. My stomach dropped. Here it came. Whatever consequence I'd earned by making myself visible, by stepping into their world uninvited. Okay, I managed. How much do you make here? Annually, with tips included? The question was so unexpected I just stared at him. That's personal. I know. I'm asking anyway. Vera's hand found mine under the table, steadying. I looked at her, and she nodded slightly. Permission, or maybe encouragement. About 32,000, I said quietly. In a good year. Tyler didn't react, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, maybe. And you have other skills beyond sign language. Education? 2 years of community college, couldn't afford to finish. What were you studying? Social work. The words felt strange saying them aloud, that old dream I'd abandoned when the tuition bills became impossible. I wanted to help kids in foster care, be the advocate I never had. The table fell silent. Vera was looking at me with such tenderness, it made my chest ache. Tyler pulled out his phone, typed something, then set it down. My mother runs a non-profit foundation, the Vandyke Foundation for Accessibility and Inclusion. It's her project, her passion. I just provide the funding and infrastructure support. He's being modest, Vera signed. He built the entire organization because he was tired of watching me be excluded from spaces that should welcome everyone. We're expanding, Tyler continued, ignoring his mother's commentary. Opening a new division focused on employment support for people with disabilities. We need someone to manage community outreach, training development, advocacy work. He paused, gray eyes fixed on me. Someone who understands what it means to be invisible. Someone who knows how to build bridges. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear over it. I don't understand what you're asking. I'm offering you a job. Tyler's voice was matter-of-fact, like he wasn't potentially changing my entire life with a sentence. 65,000 starting salary, full benefits, education reimbursement if you want to finish your degree. You'd be working directly with my mother, developing programs that actually serve the people they're designed to help. The numbers didn't make sense. The entire offer didn't make sense. You don't know me. You met me 3 hours ago. I know enough. Tyler leaned forward. I know you spent a year teaching yourself sign language to help a foster sister. I know you noticed my mother's distress when everyone else was too busy being afraid of me to pay attention. I know you defended her twice tonight, once quietly, once publicly, even though it risked your own job security. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. He's right, Vera signed. Though I want you to take the job for my sake, not his. I need someone who sees me as a person, not a charity case. Someone who challenges me when I'm being stubborn. Someone who tells me the truth. I'm a waitress, I heard myself say, the words coming out desperate, almost pleading. I don't have experience with nonprofits or program development or any of this. You have lived experience, Tyler interrupted. You understand marginalization from the inside. That's worth more than any MBA. He pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. Take the weekend to think about it. Call me Monday if you're interested. I stared at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, Tyler's name, and about 6 different contact numbers. It felt like holding a grenade. My voice cracked. Why would you do this? For someone you just met? Tyler and Vera exchanged a look. One of those wordless conversations that happen between people who've known each other forever. Can I tell her? Vera signed to her son. Tyler hesitated, then nodded. If you think it will help. Vera turned to me, her expression serious. When Tyler was 12, his father left us. Not just me, Tyler too. Said he couldn't handle a wife who was deaf and a son who was too sensitive, too emotional. I translated for Tyler, watching his jaw tighten. Tyler spent years trying to prove he wasn't weak, Vera continued. built his business, made his fortune, became exactly the kind of man his father said he could never be. But he was also incredibly lonely. He'd forgotten how to let people close. "Mom!" Tyler's voice held warning. "Hush. She needs to hear this." Vera's hands moved with gentle insistence. "Last year, I had a health scare. Minor stroke. I was in the hospital for a week, and Tyler barely left my side. I watched him realize that all his money, all his power, none of it mattered if he didn't have people who genuinely cared about him. He started the foundation expansion not because it's good business," Vera signed, "but because he wanted to create spaces where people like me, people who are dismissed, overlooked, treated as less than, could be seen, really seen." She reached across and took both my hands. "You see people, Peyton. That's your gift. Don't waste it serving food to people who'll forget you the moment they leave. Use it to change lives, starting with your own." I felt tears burning behind my eyes and blinked them back furiously. "I'm scared." "Good. That means it matters." Tyler cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I'm offering you the position because you're qualified, not out of pity. But I understand if you need time to consider it. It's a significant change." Significant felt like the understatement of the century. This morning, I'd woken up in my studio apartment, put on my uniform, and prepared for another invisible shift at a job that paid my rent, but hollowed out my soul a little more each day. Now I was sitting at a table with a billionaire and his mother, holding a business card that represented everything I'd dreamed about, but never believed I deserved. Marcus appeared at Tyler's elbow. "Sir, I hate to interrupt, but you have the conference call with Tokyo in 30 minutes. Tyler glanced at his watch and swore softly. "Already?" He looked at his mother with genuine regret. "Mom, I'm sorry, I need to—" "Go," Vera signed. "Make your business deals. I'll finish my coffee." "Peyton will stay with you?" "I can stay," I confirmed, though my brain was still trying to process everything that had happened in the past 3 hours. Tyler stood, then did something unexpected. He reached across the table and took his mother's hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender, so completely at odds with the intimidating billionaire persona, that I had to look away from the intimacy of it. "I love you," he signed, one of those 50 signs he knew, and Vera's entire face softened. "I love you too. Now go, make millions, buy something ridiculous." Tyler laughed, then turned to me. His expression shifted, becoming serious. "Thank you, Peyton, for everything tonight. Regardless of your decision about the job, you gave my mother something precious, a conversation where she was the priority, not the accommodation. I won't forget that." He left with Marcus, pulling out his phone before he'd even reached the door, already transitioning back to whatever empire required his attention at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. Vera and I sat in the sudden quiet, the dining room around us beginning its end-of-evening wind-down. Jalen was clearing nearby tables. Corinne was counting receipts at the server station. The world was continuing exactly as it had before Tyler Vandyke walked through the door, except nothing was the same, not for me. "You're thinking too loud," Vera signed, a smile playing at her lips. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do." Her signs were certain. "You're just afraid to admit it because admitting it means everything changes. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail?" "Then you fail, and you learn, and you try again." Vera's expression was fierce. "I spent 40 years making myself smaller so other people would be comfortable. It's a terrible way to live, Peyton. Trust me on this." I looked down at the business card still clutched in my hand, then back at Vera. "Why do you believe in me? You don't even know me." I know you defended me when it would have been easier to stay quiet. I know you learned a whole language because a little girl needed you. I know you're sitting here terrified but still present, still listening, still caring." Vera reached across and tapped the business card. "That's enough. More than enough." Outside the restaurant windows, the city lights blurred into streams of gold and white. My shift was technically over. I could clock out, go home, pretend tonight was just an anomaly, a strange, beautiful aberration that I'd remember fondly, but wouldn't let change anything. Or I could pick up my phone on Monday and call the number on the card. I could stop being invisible. I could start being seen. The weekend passed in a fog of anxious paralysis. I called in sick Friday, something I never did, and spent the day pacing my studio apartment, Tyler's business card propped against my coffee maker like an accusation. Saturday, I tried to distract myself. Grocery shopping, laundry, a failed attempt at reading a book where I read the same page 7 times without absorbing a single word. The card followed me everywhere, a small rectangle of embossed paper that somehow weighed more than everything else I owned combined. By Sunday evening, I'd constructed and demolished a dozen rational arguments for why I should decline the offer. I wasn't qualified. I'd embarrass myself. Tyler would realize his mistake within a week, and I'd be jobless, homeless, back to square one, but worse, because I'd know exactly what I'd lost. But underneath all the fear was Vera's voice, or rather, her hands, the way they'd moved when she told me that making yourself small was a terrible way to live. And Emma's face, years ago, when I'd signed my first full sentence to her and she'd cried because someone had finally bothered to learn her language. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the kind of cold rain that found its way under umbrellas and into bones. I got dressed for my shift at Meridian, the same black pants, white shirt, practical shoes, but my hand kept drifting to my phone. I had Tyler's card memorized by now, every number, every letter. I could dial it in my sleep. At 9:47 a.m., I finally pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. It rang 3 times. 4. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe the offer had an expiration date I'd missed. Maybe... Tyler Vandyke. His voice was crisp, professional, nothing like the warmth I'd heard when he spoke to his mother. This was the billionaire, not the son. "Mr. Vandyke, this is Peyton, from Meridian. My voice caught. "I wanted to talk about your offer." The quality of silence changed. I could hear papers rustling, a door closing. "Peyton, I'm glad you called. Hold on, let me..." "Marcus, reschedule the 10 o'clock. "Yes, push everything back 30 minutes. More rustling. Then Tyler's voice returned, softer now. "Sorry about that. You have my full attention." "I don't want to interrupt You're not interrupting anything that matters more than this conversation." He paused. "Have you made a decision?" I looked around my studio apartment, the water-stained ceiling tile I'd been meaning to report for 6 months. The second-hand furniture that came with the place. The window that looked out onto a brick wall 12 feet away. This was safe. This was known. "I want to say yes," I heard myself admit. "But I'm terrified I'll disappoint you. Your mother. Everyone." "Let me tell you something about my mother," Tyler said. "When she lost her hearing, she was 32 years old. A successful architect, married, planning to have more children. In 6 weeks, her entire world changed. She had to relearn how to navigate everything: work, relationships, basic communication." I listened, Tyler's words painting pictures I hadn't imagined. Her firm let her go, said she couldn't effectively communicate with clients anymore. Her husband, my father, told her she'd become too much work. Her own parents suggested she move to a residential facility because they didn't know how to talk to her. His voice hardened. Everyone told her what she couldn't do anymore, what she'd lost, what would be too difficult. What did she do? She learned ASL, went back to school, started her own architectural firm specializing in accessible design, raised me alone, built a life that everyone said was impossible. Tyler paused. And she did it terrified, Peyton. Every single day. Terror doesn't disqualify you. Sometimes it's the only honest response to real change. My throat felt tight. What if I'm not brave like her? You stood up to someone twice your size in a room full of people because an elderly woman you just met was being disrespected. You learned an entire language for a foster sister. You're braver than you think. You just haven't had reason to prove it to yourself yet. I closed my eyes, thought about Vera's hands moving through the air, so certain and clear. Thought about the way Tyler had looked at his mother with such fierce protection and love. Thought about the version of myself I'd been before life taught me that invisible was safer. When would you need me to start? I heard Tyler exhale. Relief, maybe. Is 2 weeks enough notice for Meridian? They'll survive. My voice came out stronger than expected. Yes, I'll do it. I'll take the job. Good. And I could hear the smile in his voice now. Welcome to the Vandyke Foundation, Peyton. My mother is going to be insufferable about being right. Despite my nerves, I laughed. Should I be prepared for I told you so? In multiple languages. She's very multilingual in her smugness. He shifted to business mode. Marcus will email you onboarding paperwork this afternoon. We'll set up a meeting for Thursday, you, me, and Mom, to discuss your role in detail. Questions? About 1,000. But I asked the one that mattered most. Does your mother really think I can do this? My mother thinks you're exactly what our foundation has been missing. Tyler's voice softened. And I learned a long time ago that she's rarely wrong about people. We said our goodbyes, and I sat staring at my phone for a long moment after the call ended. Then I texted Jeffrey my 2 weeks' notice. Professional, grateful, final. His response came within minutes. Understood. You'll be missed. I doubted that. Invisible people were easy to replace. But maybe I wouldn't be invisible anymore. Thursday's meeting was held in a conference room that had windows overlooking the entire city. I'd never been this high in a building before, 23rd floor, and the vertigo felt appropriate for how I felt about everything. Vera was already there when I arrived, seated at the massive conference table with a cup of tea and a genuine smile that settled some of my nerves. You came, she signed. You knew I would. I hoped. She gestured to the chair beside her. Sit. Tyler's running late, some crisis in the Singapore office. We have time to talk. I sat, noticing the way the leather chair was probably worth more than my monthly rent. The room smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. Are you nervous? Vera asked. Terrified, I admitted. Good. That means you're taking it seriously. Vera set down her tea. I want to explain what we're really building here. Tyler thinks it's about accessibility protocols and employment programs. And it is. That's the structure. But underneath? She paused, her hands deliberate. Underneath, it's about changing the fundamental way people think about disability, not as something to accommodate or fix, but as a natural part of human diversity. I spent decades fighting to be seen as complete. I don't want the next generation to have to fight that hard. That's a big goal, I signed. It is. Too big for me alone. Too big even for Tyler's money. Vera's expression was serious. It needs someone who understands invisibility from the inside. Someone who knows what it means to be dismissed. Someone who can translate, not just languages, but experiences. You really think I can do that? I know you can, because you already have been. Vera reached across and took my hand. You translated my words at that restaurant, yes. But more importantly, you translated my humanity to everyone watching. You reminded Tyler, that communication isn't about words. It's about presence, attention, care. The door opened and Tyler entered, followed by Marcus carrying what looked like 3 file folders and a laptop. Peyton, Mom, sorry I'm late. Tyler looked harried in a way I hadn't seen before. Tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled, the billionaire veneer cracking to show the exhausted human underneath. Singapore deal is imploding. Nothing that concerns you, just timing. Sit down before you fall down, Vera signed, and Tyler caught enough to huff a laugh. Bossy, he muttered, but he sat. Marcus distributed folders to each of us. These are the preliminary outlines for Peyton's role: training curriculum development, community partnership coordination, public speaking engagements, and direct consultation on all accessibility initiatives. I opened my folder and felt my stomach flip. The scope was massive: partnerships with schools, corporations, government agencies, public speaking, advocacy work, curriculum development for Fortune 500 companies. I looked up at Tyler. This is way more than I expected. Too much? His expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the concern underneath. No, I mean yes, I took a breath. It's a lot, but I think I want to try. Tyler's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Good. Because I've already scheduled your first speaking engagement. You what? Next month. Corporate training event for one of our partner companies, 500 employees. You'll do a 90-minute workshop on disability awareness and communication accessibility. The room tilted slightly. 500 people? You'll be great, Tyler said, like it was already decided. My mother will help you prepare. She's done hundreds of these. Don't let him bully you, Vera signed. If you're not ready, we can postpone. But something strange was happening in my chest. Not panic exactly, more like anticipation. The same feeling I'd had when I first started learning ASL for Emma. Fear mixed with purpose. No, I heard myself say. Don't postpone. I'll do it. Tyler's smile was approving. Excellent. Marcus. Market confirmed. The meeting continued for another hour. Logistics, salary details, benefits that seemed almost criminally generous. Health insurance that actually covered things. Education reimbursement. 4 weeks paid vacation. It felt like a different universe from my life at Meridian. When Marcus finally excused himself, leaving the 3 of us alone, Vera turned to her son with pointed significance. Tell her, she signed. Tyler sighed. Mom, tell her why you really created this position. I explained already. You explained the professional reasons. Tell her the real ones. Tyler looked at his mother with exasperation and affection, then turned to me. There's something you should know. The foundation expansion, this position, I started developing it 2 years ago, after my mother's stroke. But I could never find the right person. I interviewed 43 candidates. All of them had impressive credentials, advanced degrees, years of experience. He paused, gray eyes holding mine. And every single one of them talked about disability like it was a problem to solve, a deficit to manage. They had all the right language, all the correct terminology, but underneath, they saw my mother, saw people like my mother, as broken. Vera's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. Then you walked up to our table last Thursday, Tyler continued, and you didn't see a deaf woman who needed fixing. You saw my mother, a complete person having a bad technology day who might appreciate help. That distinction, It's everything. He cried about it, Vera signed to me, her expression mischievous. That night, after we got home. He actually cried because someone finally saw me the way he sees me. Mom! Tyler's face flushed. What? It's true. You did. I heard you through the bathroom door. I'm firing you both, Tyler muttered, but there was no heat in it. I felt something crack open in my chest, all the fear and uncertainty making room for something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Thank you, I said quietly, for taking a chance on someone with no credentials. You have the only credential that matters, Tyler replied. You give a damn. Everything else we can teach. My last shift at Meridian was a strange, bittersweet affair. Jeffrey had scheduled me for a quiet Tuesday lunch, probably his version of mercy, giving me an easy exit instead of a chaotic Friday dinner rush. Jalen cornered me by the coffee station around noon. So you're really leaving? For some fancy non-profit job? I really am. She struggled for words. That's amazing, Peyton. I didn't even know you were looking. I wasn't. It just kind of happened. She laughed, shaking her head. Only you would accidentally land a dream job by being nice to a customer. The rest of us have been kissing up to rich people for years and got nothing but carpal tunnel. The lunch crowd was sparse. A few business people, some students with laptops, a retired couple who came every Tuesday for the soup special. I moved through my tables with the familiar rhythm of someone who could do this job in her sleep, and part of me ached knowing I'd never do it again. At 2:00, Jeffrey called me into his office. I expected a perfunctory goodbye, maybe a handshake and a generic good luck. Instead, he handed me an envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside was a check, my tips from the past 2 weeks, plus a bonus that made my eyes widen. Jeffrey, this is too much. Tyler Vandyke called me personally, Jeffrey interrupted. Said the foundation wanted to make a donation to Meridian's Staff Development Fund, $5,000. I'm distributing it among the team, but you get the largest share. He smiled, and it was genuine. You're going to do great things, Peyton. I always knew you were special, even when you were trying your hardest to blend into the wallpaper. The words lodged in my throat. Thank you. No, thank you for making this restaurant look good when it mattered most. He extended his hand. And if this non-profit thing doesn't work out, you've always got a place here. I shook his hand, knowing I'd never take him up on the offer. Whatever I was walking toward, there was no going back to invisible. My first day at the Vandyke Foundation felt like stepping into a dream someone else was having. The office occupied an entire floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass walls and modern furniture, and views that made my stomach flip. Marcus met me at reception, professional and efficient. Morning, Peyton. I'll show you to your office, get you set up with credentials and equipment. Then Vera wants to meet at 10 for your orientation. My office? I'd assumed I'd have a cubicle, maybe share space with other staff. Marcus smiled like he'd expected my confusion. Your office, down this hallway. He led me past a break room that looked like something from a magazine. Espresso machine, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that probably cost more than my car, and stopped at a door with a nameplate that read, Peyton Foster, Director of Community Outreach and Advocacy. This can't be right, I whispered. It's right. Marcus opened the door, revealing a space that was bigger than my entire apartment, windows overlooking the city, a desk that was actual wood, not laminate, bookshelves waiting to be filled, a sitting area with a couch and chairs. I couldn't finish the sentence. Yours, Marcus supplied. Vera insisted on the corner office, Said you'd need space for private conversations and community meetings. She also picked out the artwork. Hope you don't mind. I looked at the walls and felt my breath catch. 3 large photographs, each one showing hands, young hands, old hands, weathered hands and smooth, all forming signs in ASL. They were beautiful, intimate, the kind of art that made you pay attention. Vera chose these? She has strong opinions about office design. Marcus set a laptop on my desk. She'll tell you all about it at 10. For now, get settled. Building security will have your access badge ready in 30 minutes. He left, and I stood in the center of my office, feeling like an imposter wearing someone else's life. The computer password Marcus had given me unlocked to a desktop with a welcome message. Welcome to the team. We've been waiting for you. Vera attached was my schedule for the week. Meeting with Vera and Tyler this morning. Lunch with the communications team. Afternoon session with Marcus reviewing partner organizations. Tomorrow, training curriculum planning. Thursday, site visit to a potential partner school. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and exactly what I'd been afraid to want my entire life. At 9:55, I made my way to Vera's office, which made mine look modest by comparison. She was at her desk working on something on her computer, but looked up the moment I knocked on her open door. "You're early," she signed, smiling. "I like that." "I was too nervous to wait in my office," I admitted. "Come in, sit. We have a lot to discuss." Vera gestured to the sitting area. A couch and 2 chairs arranged around a coffee table with fresh flowers and what looked like a portfolio of documents. I sat, and Vera joined me, moving with the same elegant grace I remembered from the restaurant. "First," she signed, "I need you to understand something. This foundation isn't charity. It's not about fixing people or feeling good about helping the less fortunate. Those frameworks are condescending and destructive." I nodded, following her hands carefully. "This is about systemic change, about creating a world where disability isn't automatically seen as deficit, where accessibility is baseline expectation, not special accommodation." Her signs were emphatic, passionate. "I need to know you understand that distinction." "I think I do," I signed back. "It's the difference between how can we help you function in our world versus how can we build a world that functions for everyone?" Vera's expression transformed, pride, relief, validation. "Exactly. Oh, Peyton, exactly that." She pulled out the portfolio, opening it to reveal what looked like organizational charts and program outlines. "We have 3 core initiatives. First, corporate training, teaching companies how to recruit, hire, and retain employees with disabilities, not out of legal obligation, but because it's good business and morally right. Second, educational partnerships, working with schools from elementary through university to integrate disability awareness into curriculum. Not special classes, regular curriculum that treats disability as normal human variation. Third, policy advocacy, working with legislators to create real change in accessibility laws and their enforcement. I absorbed this, the scale of it making my head spin. "And you want me to?" "All of it," Vera signed. "You'll be the face of our community outreach, the voice that tells our story, the person who builds relationships with partners and teaches our curriculum and advocates for change." That's a lot for one person. "You won't be alone. We have a team, 12 people currently, expanding to 20 by year's end. You'll have support staff, research assistants, training specialists. But you're the director. The vision comes from you." The weight of that responsibility settled over me like a physical thing. What if I mess up? "You will mess up," Vera signed matter-of-factly. Frequently. That's how learning works. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes. It's whether you'll learn from them and keep going. She reached across and took my hand. I believe in you, Peyton. Not because you're perfect, but because you're genuine. And in this work, authenticity matters more than credentials. The door opened, and Tyler entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. Morning, am I interrupting? Your timing is terrible as always, Vera signed, but she was smiling. She says my timing is perfect, I translated, unable to help myself. Tyler laughed. Liar. But thank you. He handed me one of the coffees, somehow already knowing I took it with milk, no sugar, and settled into the remaining chair. How's the first morning treating you? Like a fever dream, I admitted. I keep expecting to wake up back in my studio apartment. It's real, Tyler assured me. Though I understand the disorientation. 2 weeks ago you were serving dinner. Today you're directing a multi-million-dollar advocacy program. That's a lot of adjustment. Is it always going to feel this surreal? Probably for a few months. He sipped his coffee. Then one day you'll walk in and it'll just feel normal, like you were always supposed to be here. He's right, Vera signed. I felt the same way when I started the foundation. Took me 6 months to stop feeling like an imposter. Now I can't imagine doing anything else. We spent the next 2 hours going over details, partner organizations, upcoming events, the corporate training I'd be delivering next month. Vera had already drafted curriculum materials, but she wanted my input, my perspective, my voice integrated into everything. You have an instinct for this, Tyler noted when we broke for lunch. The way you're asking questions, pushing back on assumptions, Mom was right about you. I'm always right, Vera signed smugly. What did she say? Tyler asked. That she's always right, I translated. Accurate, Tyler conceded, then checked his watch. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes. Peyton, you're having lunch with Anna Lee from Communications. I nearly choked on my coffee. Anna Lee? From Meridian? Tyler's expression held barely suppressed amusement. Different Anna Lee Chen, our communications director. Though she's equally opinionated, so perhaps there's something in the name. After he left, Vera and I sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Are you happy you said yes? She signed. I'm terrified, I admitted. But yes, happier than I've been in, maybe ever. Good. Vera's smile was warm, maternal. Fear is useful. It means you care. Just don't let it paralyze you the way I did for too many years. What do you mean? I spent decades proving I could do everything hearing people could do, fighting to be seen as capable, independent, whole. It was exhausting. Her signs slowed, grew contemplative. Then one day Tyler asked me what I'd do if I stopped fighting and just existed, took up space without apology, used my energy for creation instead of validation. What did you do? Started this foundation, stopped trying to fit into their world, and started building one that fit me. She looked at me with intensity. That's what I want for you, Peyton. Stop making yourself small. Stop apologizing for needing space, having opinions, being brilliant. Just exist, fully and unapologetically, and watch what happens. My throat felt tight. I don't know how to do that. Practice. Every day, practice taking up space, speaking up, being visible. Vera stood, offering her hand to help me up. And when you forget, when you slip back into old patterns, I'll be here to remind you. That's what we do for each other. That evening, I stood at my apartment window, watching the city lights flicker to life below. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. How was day 1? Tyler. I smiled, typing back. Overwhelming, terrifying, perfect. His response came immediately. That's how you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. See you tomorrow. I set my phone down and looked around my small studio apartment. It didn't feel quite as cramped anymore, or maybe I didn't feel quite as small. Somewhere in this city, Vera was probably working late on foundation materials, driven by the same passion I'd witnessed at dinner 2 weeks ago. Tyler was likely still at his office, managing empires and crises with equal precision. And I was here. Peyton Foster, who'd spent 23 years being invisible, who'd learned sign language for a foster sister, who'd taken a chance on defending a stranger, and somehow found herself directing advocacy programs for a foundation that might actually change lives. The scared part of me wanted to retreat, to call Jeffrey and ask for my old job back, to return to the safety of invisibility. But the part that had stood up to Demetrius, that had sat with Vera and Tyler and translated not just words, but humanity, that part was stronger now, growing stronger every day. I pulled out my laptop and opened the curriculum materials Vera had shared. 500 people would be in that corporate training next month. 500 people who might leave thinking differently about disability, about accessibility, about the value of seeing people fully. No pressure. I laughed at myself, at the absurdity of going from serving soup to teaching corporate executives about systemic change in less than a month. It was ridiculous. It was also exactly what I'd been preparing for my entire life, even when I didn't know it. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a number saved as Vera Vandyke. I gave Tyler your number. Hope that's okay. Also, I'm proud of you. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we change the world. V. I read the message 3 times, feeling something warm and unfamiliar settle in my chest. It took me a moment to recognize it. Belonging. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible because I was hiding. I was visible because someone had looked hard enough to see me, and then taught me how to see myself. If this story reminded you that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being terrified and showing up anyway, I'd love to know. What's one thing you've been too scared to try? Drop it in the comments. Maybe this is your sign to take that first terrifying, beautiful step. Sometimes the life you're meant to live is waiting on the other side of fear. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video for more inspiring stories.